against Hamas. Let's talk about this and much more with Republican Congressman Tom Cole from Oklahoma, a member of the House Republican leadership. Congressman, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Good to be with you.
Well, thanks so much. So I want to ask you first about what happened yesterday. They think maybe 20 people killed in this attack on a UN school. The UN blames Israel. Israel is blaming Hamas. What do you make of it?
Well, obviously it's a tragedy and you regret any loss of life, but I think you have to look at the facts. Israel's been under a pretty relentless assault by thousands of rockets. They've uncovered dozens of tunnels that terrorists traverse into their territory. In war, unfortunately, bad things happen. And frankly, we've seen instances where Hamas has actually used schools to hide weapons. So it's terrible. It's regrettable. I think if the attacks on Israel stopped, I suspect the Israelis would be more than happy to pull back and go home. But I think this is going to continue until the two sides, come to some sort of understanding that there's not going to be cross-border raids on one another.
But you make a good point that Hamas, they've found that they say that Hamas is hiding weapons in schools. But also, you signed on to a letter, a resolution on Monday. They're asking the UN's top human rights official to condemn Hamas for using civilians as shields. If Israel is found to be at fault in this attack yesterday, does Israel deserve the same criticism from the U.S. Congress?
If they deliberately targeted a school, which I don't think for a minute they did, that they knew had no military activity going on, then that would be one thing. And again, we're engaged here, two sides in mortal combat, and unfortunately there's going to be collateral damage. But you got to go back to who started this incident, who's refused to stop it. Israel has abided by every attempted ceasefire. Egypt tried to broker one. Hamas rejected that. So I think the aggressor here is pretty clear. And frankly, I think one of their objectives, is to achieve, honestly, high casualties to get global sympathy. But I think if you look at the facts, it's pretty clear who the aggressor is and who's acting to defend their territory and their people.
Congressman, the fact of the matter is there's not much the U.S. Congress can do to stop the fighting right now between Israel and Gaza. But what more do you think the Secretary of State or President Obama should be doing to bring about, at the very least, a sustained ceasefire or to bring a resolution to this?
Look, I think they actually are trying to do the best they can on that. I think they've been unequivocal in their support for Israel and its right to defend itself. I think they've also, Secretary Kerry's tried to broker several shorter-term truces. A couple of those have actually happened, I think, with the hope that they would actually grow into a longer thing. So I don't have a lot of criticism here of either the administration or the Secretary of State, certainly. But I do think, people need to understand the United States stands with its friends, that it opposes aggression, that, look, we're willing to work to help in any way we can. We've certainly done a lot of humanitarian aid to the Palestinians and to people in both Gaza Strip and on the West Bank. Those are appropriate things, but other than using our good offices, it's hard to make peace between people unless both parties want to make peace. Right now, it doesn't appear to me that Hamas wants to do that.
One of the problems they're facing right now when you're talking about trying to provide humanitarian aid to the Palestinians is they're saying there's nowhere that they can go. They're going to these schools. This UN school had 70 people per classroom. They're just plain and simply running out of space. Does the United States Congress, the United States government need to come forward and very clearly state that there are some things like schools, like hospitals, that no matter what are just simply off limits because these folks need some place, these civilians need some place to find safe haven?
Well, I think there would be safe haven immediately if Hamas would stop firing rockets into Israel, would stop digging dozens of tunnels, not one tunnel, not two, to smuggle terrorists in to kill innocent Israelis, in their bedrooms at night. Let's understand, again, this is an Hamas-initiated exchange of hostilities. And I think the Israelis are awfully determined that they're going to root out these tunnels, that they're going to destroy as many of the missile sites and missile launchers as they possibly can. It's hard to argue with that. If the situation were similar, if we had missiles being fired at us by a neighboring territory, I suspect the American reaction would be pretty stern, swift, and decisive.
Let me turn your focus to one issue that the House is moving on in the hallways that you're standing in right there. This lawsuit moving forward with this lawsuit against President Obama, especially with regard to Obamacare. You know this. A lot of folks, Democrats, the president included, say this is a political ploy. This is a midterm move by House Republicans. What realistically do you guys want to get out of this lawsuit?
Well, frankly, remember there was a lawsuit against the president that was called a political stunt and a political ploy when he usurped the right of the Senate and issued recess appointments when the Senate was not in recess. He lost that case 9-0 in the Supreme Court. So it's not as if the president has not been pretty aggressive in pushing executive power. So we would like to get some clarification here. We've got a lot of tools at our disposal. I think most of them are disproportionate. You're not going to do things like cut off appropriations to important parts of government. That inconveniences the American people. Or nor do I think you ought to do things in a legislative sense to harass the president. We've got a disagreement between the two branches, and this is not uncommon. You go to court. And so that's what we're seeking to do, because we do think he's overreached. He's changed the Affordable Care Act 41 times without congressional approval. He's lost, by the way, a number of lawsuits in this area. So I think it's the appropriate tool to try and rein in the executive branch. If we lose the case, we lose the case. Well, but we'll at least have tried.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about. With regard to the courts, many constitutional experts that we've talked to, they raise serious doubts that the courts will even take it up. There's an issue of can the U.S. House show that they are actually harmed, the party that is being harmed in this situation, in this case. If the courts don't take it up, or if you lose, is that it? Is the fight over Obamacare over?
No, we'll probably move on to, again, other tools. I don't think there's multiple legal challenges to Obamacare. This is actually much more about a constitutional balance of power, checks and balances that we all read about. We think the president's moved to upset them, and not just in this area. We've singled it to a single area for the purposes of litigation, but we can go across the board, unilaterally suspending immigration laws, ignoring statute and the Bergdahl negotiation. There's multiple times the president has overreached. And again, these kind of things are pretty common. 70% of the lawsuits that Congress has aimed at the president in recent years have actually been filed by Democrats against President Bush. So it's not as if both parties don't do this. There's constitutional clarity that comes out of it on occasion. It certainly did in the case of the recess appointments. So again, I think the Democrats like to actually hype this up and act as if they're under some sort of relentless assault. This is actually Congress defending its prerogatives in an appropriate way, going to the appropriate forum, and trying to get resolution of a legitimate dispute with the President of the United States.
Both parties do it, for sure, but I think the criticism that you hear and the frustration from the American people is when that's the only thing that they honestly see that Congress is doing at this time is filing lawsuits, and that's why I want to get to that issue of immigration really quickly, because we're running out of time.
Let me correct quickly. I mean, yesterday we passed an extraordinary overhaul, largest one in modern history, of the Veterans Health Care Facility. We did a $1 trillion plus omnibus bill earlier this year.
An excellent point, but that is, there is a crowd across the board outrage on that. That's not necessarily compromise when you see a department that is so poorly run.
It was absolutely compromise. I mean, there was a serious negotiation between the House and the Senate across partisan lines between Bernie Sanders and Jeff Miller, and they arrived at a good solution. They worked together, and they got it done.
All right, so can you get that done on immigration? And are you prepared to stay in town until something is actually agreed upon across party lines?
Yeah, I'm always prepared to stay in town or come back to town. I suspect we will not adjourn. I think we'll stay in pro forma session. So if there can be agreements, Congress could return immediately and act it. But we're going to actually pass a bill today that actually addresses the problem, provides the president with additional resources, gets at the core issue. And unfortunately, so far, he's blamed all this on a 2008 law, I think incorrectly, but let's assume he's right, but then told us you can't change the 2008 law in any way. He's offered absolutely no suggestions. We know from news reports that the administration was warned in 2012 and 2013 the situation was brewing and took no preemptive action. So we're trying to address an emergency, and we're willing to come back and work other areas. But this is a border crisis situation. Really, the immigration overhaul debate is irrelevant to it. If immigration legislation had been passed and this were going on, and it would still be illegal. So we need to deal with the immediate problem. We think we've got the appropriate answers.
And the volley will go back and forth. The House will do its will. We already know that the president says he will veto that bill. He's already threatened that. We will see where the Senate goes, and if you guys stay in town to figure it all out.
It'd be great if he offered an answer and a proposal of his own. He hasn't done that.
Congressman, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Chris, over to you.
Hey, you pushed all the important